Doubles and coffee. Just yesterday I had to do a doubles and coffee to show y'all that standards and principles and simple objective facts do not exist. It ceases to exist once PNM is involved. The Honorable Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar said that she awaits to see the response of the President's senators to a bill that she would like passed through the Senate to protect the citizens and keep them safe and secure, to keep the crime rate going down and to live up to her promises made on the platform. One of the most important ones being that she will bring safety and security back to Trinidad and Tobago. And the Honorable Prime Minister said that she awaits the response of the President's senators. She went on to say that she has been listening and following the contributions and she's not been impressed. What does this mean? First and foremost, the video that I did yesterday just stated that once there's a simple objective principle that exists in the world on planet Earth with all human beings who have a cognitive ability, for example, the principle of apparent bias. What is the principle of apparent bias? It basically says that fruit from the poison tree, if analyzed by a fair-minded, informed person, and they come to the perception or the conclusion that a human being who has certain affiliations, certain beliefs, or has done certain actions in the past, if brought into a position to be judge or a decision maker on an issue where two sides of a coin are possible, then if the fair-minded, informed individual, a reasonable individual, believes that more than likely it is possible that the actions, affiliations, or the past associations of an individual would lead them to be biased to one side rather than the next. That's a simple principle. It doesn't involve personalities. It applies to anyone on the planet. Anyone and everyone. First and foremost, these president senators have been appointed by the president. Now you see, when the DOGLA, when the UNC, when Kamla Persad-Bissessar says, listen, the PNM appointing a president who not only is a PNM, has grown up in the PNM, has been taught and brainwashed into the policies and philosophies of the PNM, so much so that she's on public record as saying that you must preach not the word of the PNM, not the constitution of the PNM, not the policies of the PNM, but the gospel of the PNM. The word gospel is a powerful word. But this president, Kangaloo, preached the gospel of the PNM, encouraged others to spread that gospel for years. She went in to be president of the Senate, and she went worse. She dictated the gospel of the PNM from a bully pulpit. So she has a track record of putting her actions, her words into actions, and it's there for all to see. Then this person is elevated to the office of Prime Minister and is in charge of discharging objective, independent functions. This cannot be so because the tree is poisoned with Balizé juice. The tree is poisoned with the gospel of the Balizé. Therefore, any fruit emanating from it, a reasonable, fair-minded person who's informed would believe that there would be bias. That's all. That's the principle. So all the president's senators, Senator Atz, I see media set you up and asked you a question, and you said you basically take umbrage to the Prime Minister's statements because you are impartial and the independent senators are impartial. Doesn't matter. It's not, the principle is not about actual bias, whether you are actually biased or not. You could be the most principled, objective human being on earth. But the principle of apparent bias states, justice must not only be done, but must be seen to be done. Meaning the decision maker, meaning the president's senators, must avoid situations that create a reasonable suspicion or perception of partiality, even if they aren't actually biased. So it's not about attacks on any individual or whether you are actually biased or not. That's a totally separate debate, and there can be some debate or some merit to that discussion. However, the principle, the benchmark for disqualification is whether there's apparent bias. So, a reasonable suspicion or perception of partiality, even if the person or the judge or the individual is not actually biased. It is judged objectively. Would a fair-minded, informed observer conclude that there is a real possibility of bias based on the decision maker's conduct, interests, or affiliations? In this case, it's affiliations. It doesn't have to be conduct. We're not going there yet. That could be a further discussion. But affiliations, all of the president's senators are appointed by the president. The president is a PNM who preaches the gospel of the PNM, who's been brought up in the ways and the philosophies and the beliefs of the PNM, whose experience and life experience have brought her into close contact on a daily basis with the PNM. Her actions as she held different portfolios, whether minister of the PNM or president of the Senate, ruling in favor of the PNM thousands and thousands of times. The president is a PNM. Therefore, the question is, anybody, not only president, senators, but members to the independent institutions that the president is duty-bound to appoint, the EBC, the Police Service Commission, the Justice and Legal Services Commission, the Judicial and Legal Services Commission, the Public Services Commission, the Teaching Service Commission, the Integrity Commission, that all people, human beings who are appointed by this poison tree, this PNM, this person who preaches the PNM, whose whole life has been PNM, whose entry into politics is PNM, whose ascension to different portfolios is due to the PNM, that once you're appointed by this person, then there's a reasonable, objective individual who's well informed, have a suspicion that when ruling, that this person will choose people that are biased towards the PNM, and anybody appointed by her is then poisoned because it's objective. If you are appointed by a PNM, a president preaching the gospel of the PNM, isn't it reasonable that an objective, informed person would say, when there's an issue that comes down to the nitty-gritty between the PNM and the UNC, you appointed by a PNM, that you may lean and be biased towards the PNM. That's called apparent bias. This prevents actual bias, which is prejudice, and perceived bias, which is suspicion, from undermining fairness, requiring disqualification if such a possibility exists. So you see, when you allow the PNM to simply appoint a PNM to President's house, basically every appointee thereafter should be disqualified based on the principle, objective principle of apparent bias. It's a simple thing. It's not rocket science, but once PNM get involved, you get confused. The mere fact, Senator adds, that you answered the question shows that a reasonable person who's objective and informed could believe that you're suffering from breaching the principle of apparent bias, because you should not even be asked about that situation because you are involved in that situation if we are applying the principle really. But I'm not going to deal with you. I'm not going to deal with Michaela. Michaela, how your bareback money man going? The cuss bud. I ain't hearing him cuss recently. I'm going to deal with Faris Al-Rawi. He took it a little bit differently because Faris Al-Rawi has been very silent for a long time. The media asked him a question in the parliament yesterday, and he chose to speak. And Faris Harawi went to the ridiculous conclusion, as he always does, mainly because his pants is so tight that oxygen to his brain is limited, and therefore his logic, reasoning, when rational, is always confusing to those who have a normal cognitive function. So Faris Harawi said, and tried to make the case, that Kamla Persad-Bissessar is breaching the rule of law, and her comments and her statements and her positions and this iteration of being prime minister is noteworthy, and he's worried. I don't think Kamla cares that you are worried, Faris, but he's trying to say that Kamla Persad-Bissessar has no respect for the rule of law. Well, let me deal with Faris. Faris, as Attorney General, as you're talking about rule of law, did you withdraw a case against Stuart Young, the junior minister in the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs, the former client, Malcolm Jones? Did you withdraw a case from the court to recoup over $1 billion? Would you say that adhered to the rule of law principles? Faris, did you sell a Porsche to Vincent Nelson's attorney, Roger K. Wildsing? Do you find that, is that a breach of any sort of propriety or rule of law or ethical conduct or moral conduct? What do you think? Faris Harawi, did you sign an indemnity with Roger K. Wildsing's client, Vincent Nelson, to be a witness in a criminal probe against former UNC ministers, senators, attorney general, and so on? Do you find that correct? Did you not usurp the authority, constitutional duty of the DPP? Was that respect for the rule of law, Faris? Faris, were you part of the government which brought a defense and litigation to the lawsuit brought by Vincent Nelson against breach of the indemnity? Was your government's defense that the indemnity that you signed was illegal in the first place and was negotiated in bad faith, and therefore the lawsuit should fail? Does that sound like the rule of law of a man of principle and morals and ethics, Faris? Faris, the billions in CPEP that before the election and on the election day that you caused the board of CPEP, the PNM board, to be doing a round robin to approve billions of dollars of expenditure and extending every single contract up till 2029 without cabinet approval, where the CEO said that the chairman told him that you said, Faris, that the cabinet had approved, and therefore they passed on that message. The corporate secretary did a board note for the board that stated cabinet had agreed to the extension of all these PNM financiers, PNM family members, PNM councillors contracts to 2029, Faris. Do you find that followed the rule of law, or are the police coming knocking, Faris? Police, boy blue. You talking about rule of law to Kamla Persad-Bissessar? It looked like they didn't have a law that you ain't breached, Faris. Faris, what about renting a building that only has residential approval for 9 long years and over $69 million without the legal right to do so, without commercial approval, collecting rent for a residential building at commercial rates, Faris? Is that a breach of the rule of law? Is that criminal conduct, Faris? Did you do that, Faris? Did your company do that? A company that you were a director on? Answer that. You talking about rule of law, Faris? Over 100 recusals from cabinet, where decisions are being taken by your government to enrich you, your friends, your family, your financiers, and people close to you. You find that's good, that's proper, that's moral, and that's ethical? Do you think that follows the rule of law? Recusal after recusal, Faris? Over a century of recusals. Lara make a century in runs and you make it in recusals. Is that right? Well, you swore on the Bible to go ahead and serve the people without fear or favor. Doesn't that show a lot of favoritism, nepotism, graft, and corruption, Faris? Answer now, Mr. Rule of Law. Faris, what about you were part of government that thwarted a merit list? That the Prime Minister went to the President and caused a merit list to be thwarted and a police service commission to collapse? Faris, in 2013, as an opposition senator, you defended the Emailgate lies by saying you must investigate the contents of something that didn't exist, Faris. Rowley and you paid Inspector Kate to go after Anil and Munilal and fail, running down a witch hunt. Was that upholding the rule of law, Faris? Faris, I think you should hush your mouth and go in your bed.